Timeline breakpoints. But for Bob, Bob is still trying to get a girlfriend. Bob. Let's go over what the timeline breakpoints are again very quickly. So you've got your timeline. You've got the lightning bolt, the loss of something at a point, the impact. You've got the point the thing has to be back up by, which I called the RTO. You've got the point that you can afford to lose and redo the work on, the backup, the RPO. The reality is that for this specific example, you're probably not going to be doing a lot of RPOs. It's probably going to be a lot of RTOs. So what are the functions, processes, etc. that Bob was focused on? So we have Bob here. We have Bob. And then we have his 4 different things. So we had health, health/fitness, charisma. We've got money, which I believe I used the fun $sign. And then we've got interesting stuff. So like hobbies and all that. So we have these different sections of Bob's life. And how long can Bob afford to lose these things for? What are the RTOs for each? So let's think about these 4 different departments of Bob's life and what these look like. So we've got health and fitness. This is going to be, Bob's gym membership, Bob's access to a shower, Bob's access to whatever is needed for his optimal health and fitness as part of the process of finding a girlfriend. So let's have the process here. So we have process equals find girlfriend. Okay, so these are the 4 components of that. Doesn't really matter what you call it. We have this component. How long is Bob willing to allow this to not exist before it is intolerable for this process? Now, if this includes a working shower or includes some level of presentability, maybe Bob has to have puffy big muscles frequently to feel confident or whatever when he's having a conversation with someone in the public, because that's what Bob likes. How long is Bob willing to go without a shower for, or blah, 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 before this is in jeopardy? Now, for Bob, we'll say that Bob is fairly rough and tumble and he likes having a certain level of musk, but not too much musk. Bob is probably, let's say he's okay with losing this for, let's put it at 3 days. 3 days? Could he go a week? Bob's going to be quite musky after a week. He's missed too many workouts. I don't know. He can use the showers at the gym. So maybe, he wants to shower once every 3 days for sure. Yeah, let's put Bob at 3 days. He wants to make sure that he can get a workout in and get his shower once every 3 days. After that, Bob is not having a good time. He wants to make sure whatever his plan is, he gets to do that once every 3 days. Fine. That's his RTO for that. Next, his talking ability. So if his ability to talk to someone or his practice at this goes out, then he's going to have this disrupted. Now, what does that look like? What does not being able to talk to people or not practice his charisma look like? This process is probably talking to other people in his life. This is having access to vocal cords. Oh, that's probably more in health and fitness. So this is probably some sort of process or application of member checking. Hey, I had this idea. Can you give me feedback? That whole thing. Now, Bob may not have a large number of friends. He may have a fair amount of friends, but he's done some thinking about what sort of personal growth he needs to do to go through his find girlfriend, and maybe he wants to check with his best friend or one of his women friends to help. I had this idea, does it sound creepy, does it sound good, whatever, some sort of member checking. Maybe he's taking a speech class, who knows. So something like that. Maybe he wants to make sure that at minimum he gets to kind of get recentered once a week. So if he doesn't talk to other human beings to figure out what's going on in his head at least once a week, Bob starts listening to the gremlins in the head, and he starts going a bit cray cray. So Bob says, you know what? I want to, at minimum, no matter what, I can't go more than a week without talking to somebody. Fine, whatever. We're going to do a week, Bob. Sounds good, Bob. Okay, so Bob has put an RTO at a week. No problem. Money. How long is Bob willing to go without money or without an income before this becomes an issue? Now, Bob may have some sort of savings saved up, or something saved up just in case he loses his job. Or Bob may be like any number of the people live in, the modern world in current year with economic turmoil, and maybe $300 from homeless. So Bob may have, a lot of room to move here, or maybe absolutely desperate and scared to lose Bob's job. But let's be honest, if Bob loses his job, he's not guaranteed to get another one within 24 hours. So really, this is the question of how long can I afford to be without a job for before it is intolerable for this process. Now, if Bob is jobless, this entire process may fail if Bob views this as really, really important for his job. So we might say that, he's willing to maybe go, let's say he doesn't meet a month's rent. That'd be a problem. So let's say this is probably at, I want to just say a week. I really want to just say a week, but I know that you don't just manifest another job. But the reality is that maybe this whole thing just fails if he loses his job and he says this isn't irrelevant. So he needs to find one immediately for this to start happening again. That could be a thing. It's not realistic though. I'm going to put this at a month. I'm going to put this at 1 month, and I'm going to magically assume that Bob has a reserve available so that he can panic while finding a new job. I'm going to magically say that's the case, even though that could be lower. Okay, interesting stuff. So Bob wants to actually, no, there's no way. There's no way that's a month. There's no way. Bob is not going on dates and spending any money if Bob doesn't have, that's like a day. This whole process is failing if Bob can't afford to pay for anything. No, wait a minute. Maybe Bob is okay with seeking out someone else who pays all of his bills for him. And, he's new age. Maybe Bob is okay with a month. You know what? I'm not going to judge Bob. Bob can do what Bob wants. Bob doesn't have to pay the bill. That's okay. Bob should be upfront if he's not going to pay the bill, but fair enough. Okay, Bob doesn't want to pay the bill. Okay, we'll keep Bob at a month for now. I'm not sure. Whatever. It's a month. Okay. So interesting stuff. Bob needs something to talk about that is interesting. Otherwise, he's just a boring date. It's not interesting. He's just, what I call last video or the other video? He's a loser. We don't want that for Bob. So how often does Bob have to make sure that he has interesting stuff, something topical or interesting to talk about? He needs something relevant. You know what? Bob might think that he can talk, but if there's nothing to actually talk about that's a problem, maybe he needs to participate in something that is interesting, have some sort of hobby at least once a week, but maybe it doesn't happen for a week. He can stretch it. He can talk about something he did last month. He has to take some time to get a new hobby. Sure, why not? Okay, we'll put you at a month, Bob. You got a month to find a job, and you got a month to find something to do, because otherwise you're just incredibly boring. Okay, so Bob has figured out these RTOs, and he's figured out when he has to get certain things by. Now, when Bob goes to try to come up with solutions for these sorts of things, he's got to say, okay, look, my water doesn't work. My pipes freeze. Something happens where I don't have access to running water in where I live. No problem. I need to have a solution where I can get that within 3 days. A friend's house, a relative's house, a membership at a public community center or a gym or something. I need something that can make it so I can get that in every 3 days. No problem. Otherwise, if I don't do that, I am not fit, I'm not suitable to meet my own personal standards to go seek a new girlfriend. No problem. Charisma talking. My phone doesn't work. I talk to all of my friends on my phone. If I can't fix my phone, this could be extended power outage, whatever, then I lose this for more than a week. That's not acceptable. I have to have some alternate thing in place to make sure that no matter what, I can talk with someone once a week. This could be maybe Bob meets up in person with people and he does it. And if he can't, then he has another place that he can go that's a social place. He can shoot ideas off of people. Bob goes to the bar. And maybe he drinks, maybe he doesn't, but he has a social outing where he can bounce his ideas off of other people. Maybe, if he doesn't meet up with his friend and he doesn't want to go to the bar, Bob does a 2-for-1 and does a sort of like fitness class with other people where for some reason he's the person who just never stops talking on the bicycle in the spin class, whatever. Okay, so Bob figures that out and he comes up with some sort of alternative where he can regularly socialize and he can make sure he can get some of that in once a week. Okay, money. Bob does not to be without a job for 1 month. Now, job security is quite the challenge. Fair enough. I get it. Bob might want to look at what sort of behaviors he can change to save up enough where he can essentially have money without having a job because of a reserve to help tide him by so that this isn't as much of an issue. Frankly, if Bob loses his job in a really interesting way, maybe the loss of job has now created interesting stuff to talk about. Who knows? Some sort of financial strategy here to help extend that or make this lack of money problem start happening later on might be a way to look at this. Bob could consistently have his resumes out there. If Bob doesn't think that his job is secure, and if he doesn't think his employer is going to have an issue with his resumes being out there, fair enough, there's risk there. Bob could be, always making sure a job offer is available somewhere so that he can quickly go do an interview. Bob may have a family member that has a business where, he has a sort of implicit agreement with the family member of, look, if I ever lose my job, do I have a place I can fall back on for the moment so that I'm not homeless? The family member goes, yeah, no problem. Something like that, you can come up with some sort of alternate strategy. Make sure that because Bob has said I have to have it within a month, that will be up and running within a month. Look, if all else comes to worse, I will go work at a fast food joint. Great, sounds great. Can you start working and start getting paid within a month? Now, if you have severance at a business, they're still paying you because they've terminated you and they're paying you because of the termination, right? So this might start really when your severance ends. It might not be a month. All of these things depend. However, if Bob wants to find a girlfriend and needs his job to pay him severance, otherwise he has a problem and he considers this process important, then he probably doesn't want to punch his boss and get terminated for, I'm losing it in my brain. The terminated for cause. Yes, he doesn't want to be terminated for cause because that kind of throws his plan out the window. So yes, that is something that Bob should probably consider if this is his primary goal. Okay. Interesting stuff. 1 month. What sort of thing can he do? He can have multiple hobbies. He can have hobbies that he historically had before that are things that are around a while that he can fall back into if something falls out of favor. He can pick up a hobby that is pretty much going to be there forever. Look, you pick up pretty much any sport that's commonly played, soccer or football, cricket, swimming. You pick up pretty much any sport, it's going to be around forever. You can probably multi-roll it with a health and fitness thing too. You can find points of interest, if you're interested in them, that are going to be around for a while. Cars, people are driving cars. You're interested in cars, you're going to find people that are otherwise interested in cars. Now, you might, if you're looking for a girlfriend, and your only interest is cars, and she's not interested in cars, well, consider how interesting your stuff is, but whatever. At least you have something you're passionate that you like to talk about, and that's one of the things that Bob decides is important for this process, no problem. You can look at different strategies to make it so if that thing is lost, it's less likely to lose, or there is a backup or something. Applying RTO and timeline breakpoints to Bob trying to find a girlfriend. Why not? We can look at RPO for how long we can lose the backup here. However, I don't think we really need to apply internet backups to having a shower. Or I suppose if Bob was journaling and talking to ChatGPT and really wanted to have a record of his journals and progress, you could put it there. I'm not confident that the best way of approaching this would be ChatGPT, although I suppose as a stopgap you could. There's a way you could make RPO fit in here, but by and large I think RTO is the better fit for this sort of thing to help out Bob.